You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. Hey, I'm Ivan Zach. I'm excited to announce that I'll be speaking at World Small Animal Veterinary Association Congress in Lisbon at the end of September, where I'll also serve as a judge for startup pitches at the Unleash Startup Village by Purina on September 28th. My four talks on September 27th will be on burnout prevention and strategies in vet hospitals, implementation of telehealth, compensation models and motivation for the veterinary teams, and disaster response through telehealth. If you're there, let's connect.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co host, we interview the innovators in this space. Ivan, please go ahead and get us started.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zach, excited to introduce a colleague of mine, Dr. Ricky Walther. Dr. Walther is DVM and Chief Medical Officer of the Pawlicy, is a small animal general practitioner in the greater Sacramento area, California, realizing the positive financial and medical impact that pet insurance can provide for pet parents and the profession. He lends support and advice to companies like Pawlicy Advisor, the pet insurance marketplace that simplify the process of connecting with veterinary financing resources. Ricky, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So, you've been brought on to Pawlicy recently as a chief medical officer. The question that I have is, what is Pawlicy? What do you guys do? How are you different from other insurance company? And especially for you as the new chief medical officer, what is so exciting for you in this company?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. So, Pawlicy Advisor is a pet insurance marketplace. So, we're not an actual insurance provider. We are a marketplace that helps pet owners find the ideal fits for their pets based on breed, age, where they live in the country, price points, coverage details, all of those pieces. And we have a flow that helps them make decisions in an educated fashion in order to help them find the insurance policy that fits their particular pet and their family in the best way possible. We partner with veterinarians to kind of ease the pet insurance conversation in general and take that kind of off of their plate and allow them to outsource the conversation since veterinarians are so busy. What's so interesting about Pawlicy Advisor to me, I actually met them about 4 years ago and started as their veterinary advisor. So I've watched the growth of the company, and I'm coming on full time as chief medical officer now, really as we build out additional resources for veterinarians so that we can help them have the pet insurance conversation as part of a larger financial conversation around pet care, and try to make that as easy of a process as possible and take the need for veterinarians to be experts in pet insurance kind of off their plate.
That's awesome, Ricky. So you said you got to kind of watch the growth of Policy Advisor from the sidelines. We've had the founder on the show. So tell us what the last couple of years have been like and why you got so excited and wanted to join. It sounds like there's been a lot of growth.
Yeah. So when I first met Woody, our founder, and our co-founder Travis, they had this great idea and were really excited to kind of pitch it to veterinarians to see whether or not a pet insurance marketplace would resonate with vets and be something that they'd be really excited to kind of outsource that conversation. Since then, we work with veterinarians all across the country who tell us that we save their clinics a ton of time by being able to recommend a marketplace instead of going into specifics on different policies. We've also found that there's a huge growth in what we've been able to accomplish because we take a lot of the liability and potential blowback from like a customer review perspective off of the veterinarians, right? You can imagine as a veterinarian, if you tell an owner, I really like this one particular company and that owner has a bad experience, then that kind of reflects poorly on your recommendation. And so what we've found is that veterinarians are excited, one, because it simplifies the conversation. We're busy in practice and we don't have a lot of time. And two, it takes that liability of not being a licensed insurance agent and not having to get into the details of all the different aspects that make pet insurance so complicated.
So, I have a question in general about insurance. And so, I live in Canada. We have medical coverage that comes out of our taxes. In the UK, it's the same thing. They have NHS, and their medical insurance is essentially government. And then in US, most people buy or get their insurance through their employer. So they clearly know that insurance is something that you should buy, that you should be paying for, and you should have. Despite the fact, last time I checked, the rates of sort of the general population, pet population, covered by 20+% in the UK, where they don't know that they need to buy their health insurance as humans, and in US, where they always buy human health insurance, the rate I think is penetration is like what, 3% still. Why is it so low?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and one that I think the whole profession and the pet insurance industry has been asking and trying to answer for quite a while. I think one of the reasons is that there was a study done in 2019 by the AVMA that showed that 65% of pet owners who purchased insurance did so at the recommendation of their veterinarian. And so one of the things that I think we find is that pet owners are having a hard time deciding whether or not pet insurance is worth their money and whether or not it's something that they're going to get value out of. And so we've seen pet insurance providers innovate in this space and try to come up with ways to help show owners how pet insurance can be useful. But what we are seeing now is that because of the cost of veterinary care and how that's starting to increase, veterinarians are now, it's on their front of mind a lot more frequently. They're having owners ask about it. We've kind of solved this issue that was for the longest time people not knowing that pet insurance existed or how it worked. We're starting to get to a place where people understand how it works. And now they're being driven there by these increased veterinary care costs and kind of the stress of paying for a vet visit. And so we're starting to see veterinarians be more active in that conversation. And I hope that we'll start to see those numbers increasing. There's been some really exciting evidence in the last couple of years that pet insurance is starting to increase in adoption. NAPVIA, which is a group that kind of helps to monitor pet insurance in our industry, reported that last year there was a 21.7% average growth rate for pet insurance. That was actually from 2021 to 2022. And we expect that trend to continue as veterinary cost of care increases over time.
So does that mirror what you guys see from a traffic perspective for your service? And then a second part of the question is how do you guys get paid again? What's the business model?
Yeah, so the answer to the first part of that question is yes, we are seeing more and more owners and an increase in traffic, specifically from kind of veterinary recommendation or referral to our site because people are talking about it in the clinics, and we're seeing that the number of people coming to the site looking into insurance and choosing to ultimately purchase is definitely increasing. To kind of remind how Pawlicy Advisor works, so we see ourselves as a third-party, non-biased pet insurance solution where we have a lot of different providers on our site, and we get paid by basically a standard rate and system across the board. So we're not incentivized to rank a particular insurance provider higher or lower than another. Our big goal is to increase the number of pets insured in general in the United States. And so what we find is if we can provide more education and more around what is and is not covered by insurance and who it fits best with, we'll hopefully see an increased number of policies purchased. But not only that, also retention over time because they'll be better educated on what exactly it is that they purchased and how to use it.
So I do a couple shifts here and there in ER, and I always see people when they should have had insurance, but they didn't. So that's unfortunately, and in fact, because in emergency, they're not your clients. You see someone once, hopefully, and then, you don't see them again. But we always do recommend to get insurance. Unfortunately, in many cases that we recommend, then that particular condition cannot be covered anymore. So it's kind of a tough sale because they kind of got this already, that this is not going to be covered in the future. And maybe I don't know about all insurance policies, and that's exactly why we need to advertise Pawlicy in our hospital. But as a emergency veterinarian, and maybe give me another flavor as a GP veterinarian, how do you actually pitch it? What's the best way to explain that pets do need insurance? Like, what is that pitch that you could recommend to a veterinarian?
Yeah, so I'm really glad you asked that question because I think it's one of the most exciting things that I'm looking to tackle as Chief Medical Officer with Pawlicy Advisor, which is really to help vets talk about insurance in the different capacities and areas that we encounter these conversations. So I'll start with my experience, which is primarily in general practice. it's really getting veterinarians to understand that having conversations with pet owners about financing and paying for pet care in general needs to happen at the very first visit that they come in. And so what I educate veterinarians on is to, during those puppy kitten exams and like annual wellness exams, those are amazing times to bring up things like pet insurance, and other financial solutions for paying for their pets, so that owners can look into it before things like pre-existing conditions are diagnosed. Because like you had mentioned, pretty much all insurance companies are going to exclude pre-existing conditions. There are some specifics for different providers, in which case they'll have waiting periods or times after curable conditions occur. And so that's one of those things that's typically hidden in the fine print of policies that we try to help highlight, and show. But for a GP veterinarian, I really think it's important to have it as part of your general annual wellness spiel to healthy and happy pets, but also those puppy and kittens, and specifically giving types of disease processes that we would expect to see with certain pet breeds. And that's another thing we really try to highlight at Pawlicy Advisor. With your specific question around emergency, so that's actually a really exciting and interesting area that Pawlicy Advisor has seen. We resonate really well with a lot of emergency veterinarians. And part of the reason why that is because there are those specifics, right? We have to caveat the conversation by the condition that they came to see us for is not likely to be covered, but it can help cover for future conditions and or other disease processes coming on board. My favorite example of this is the yellow lab that comes into the clinic and has a foreign body of some kind or something like that, and costs a couple $1,000s right off the bat when they're a puppy. That's a perfect time to talk about insurance in the case of, in the future, if that pet has other conditions like allergies that develop or chronic ear infections or things like that. Those pet owners have already been out of pocket quite a bit of money for that initial procedure, and coming up with something like pet insurance to help protect against future big payouts and things like that can really help to give owners a way to avoid the difficult and scary situation that they're finding themselves in while they're in the ER clinic. The biggest thing, though, is really educating on what a pre-existing condition is and what it isn't, and which particular emergencies do and do not have those aspects attached. And that's part of what we try to do with the search flow on our website.
You reminded me about how I pitch insurance, especially to Labrador owners. I tell them that it has to be like a car purchase. You can't take it off the parking lot before you get insurance for the labs. Are there policies that consider a foreign body not pre-existing condition, or is that considered pre-existing condition in all of them? Because it's not like it's a disease process. It's just dog being stupid. Do they all consider that foreign body is something that if it happens in the future, that's pre-existing?
So foreign bodies are actually a really unique one because of the fact that it really depends on the fine print of a policy and waiting periods for what they call curable conditions. That's one of those things where when we have owners that have had something like a foreign body, I recommend that one benefit of Pawlicy Advisor is that we have licensed insurance agents that are available by phone and chat. And so owners can actually ask those specific questions of specific policies that they're looking into. The reason why I can't necessarily blanket answer one way or the other is because, as I'm sure you guys know, there's over 37 different providers and growing right now. And so there's so many different options out there for different policies. And so they change frequently, right? And so it's really based on individual policies and what people are looking into. That's why we always recommend that, as veterinarians, we should be referring people to a marketplace and or a different entity that can go through the specifics of an individual policy, especially when pet owners have a condition like a possible foreign body in the past. And the same thing goes with other pre-existing conditions, right? Like a skin infection or allergies. Is that insurance company going to treat it differently? And those change policy to policy.
So if I don't know much about insurance, and as an ER vet, I'm just too lazy to learn about insurance. I just kind of, when people ask or when I tell them, I just go to reception and say, we have pamphlets for some sort of assurance here, right? I don't know the name. I don't know the policy. I don't know what they cover, which is probably terrible. So your recommendation as a product is essentially just have Pawlicy Advisor as one source of information, and then that they just get that and you take care of them to select the one that fits them best?
Yes. So when I was a small animal general practitioner as my full-time job prior to joining Policy, that's exactly how I talked about insurance. Is there's so many different options out there, and I'm not a licensed insurance agent, and I can't walk you through those details. So I recommend that you go to policy. .com. I always used to joke and say policy like a dog's paw. Everyone would laugh, and then they'd go and hopefully go and look up our website after getting home and be able to look and see and go through that education process around all the pieces of insurance. That's one of the things that I think, kind of going back to some of the questions you guys asked at the beginning around, why is pet insurance having a harder time with adoption? Part of the reason is, like we've talked about in this country, everybody knows they need car insurance, right? So they know they need car insurance, they go get car insurance, and they don't really look into the details of the different plans. They ask somebody else to help them. So typically somebody kind of helps sign them up, and then they just go for it and they forget about the fact that they even have it. With pet insurance, it's something that they're going to actually interact with, right? They don't have to get into a car accident to use it. They're going to use it frequently anytime their pet is sick or going to the vet. And so they do care about all those details, and they want to understand them, and they want to understand what they're paying for. And so that's where that conversation that a veterinarian or even a veterinary team member might be spending 5-10 minutes on trying to explain why pet insurance is important. If you just direct them to a marketplace that's focused on education like we are, we walk them through what is a deductible, what is coverage percentages, how much is the reimbursement, what are those waiting periods, how long does reimbursement take? All of those different pieces they can then learn on our website, and the vet teams don't have to keep up with the ever-changing landscape of pet insurance and all of the new providers and policies that are showing up on a regular basis. And we at Policy Advisor are working hard to work with as many as we possibly can to provide that resource to veterinarians within the profession.
Ricky, and so your customers again are the individuals that are seeking advice on which policy to use, not pet insurance companies looking to be placed higher in the ranks.
Correct. Yeah. So we have relationships with all of the pet insurance companies, and we're working with all of them to, be on our site. And we'd love to have every single insurance company listed on our site. Part of the reason that takes time is because we have pretty deep integration with our insurance partners, and we get a lot of very detailed information from them, as you can imagine, in order to make the recommendations that we're making. And so that process takes time. But yeah, our customers truly are the clients. And that's one of the things that, thinking back to when I first met Woody and Travis and they had first started Policy Advisor, it's what got me so excited and why I worked with them as an advisor for so long, is just this concept that we really have incentives aligned, right? We get paid by the insurance companies and at a kind of like preset standardized rate. And we don't charge anything to the veterinary clinics or to the clients to use our site. And because of those things, it's kind of a win for everyone. We're allowed to provide more education to pet owners so that they can make educated decisions. We take time, or we give time back to the veterinary teams because they don't have to be experts in insurance. And we're overall getting more pets insured, which is something that we really need in order to combat some of these issues with cost of care that are occurring in our country right now.
Two more short questions before we wrap up. Are you in Canada? And are there insurance policies that cover exam fee?
So we are not currently in Canada, although in the future, I'm sure it's something we would love to consider, but we are not currently in Canada. And then as far as does pet insurance cover exam fees? So typically the answer to that question is no, although there are a lot of pet insurance companies that do offer wellness plans and things of that nature that you can add into addition to pet insurance, and vet clinics also offer their own wellness plans that can be bought in conjunction. So there are ways to get those exam fees covered. But I typically, when I talk about the general pet insurance that people think about, is accident and illness insurance. And so it's really to as just like all insurances, it's a way to pay to mitigate risk for when those conditions come up in the future.
That makes tons of sense. Listen, thanks for joining us. It was a really interesting conversation. I feel like we got the chance to ask you more questions than we do most guests. So, really concise answers and really good information. We like to wrap up all of our episodes in the same way. So, get a couple questions for you, and then we promise we'll let you go. First question is YouTube video, TED Talk, a book, something that you found interesting that you'd like to recommend to our guests.
Yeah, so in preparation and thinking through this question, I actually wanted to mention a program I actually just went through that I think was super helpful and insightful as a veterinarian. It's the MentorVET program. I know you guys have talked to Dr. Reinhardt before on your podcast. I would highly recommend anybody who wants to get involved in mentorship within the veterinary space to consider their programs. I went through their full program and had an amazing experience, learned a ton as a leader, and also got some amazing mentorship within the veterinary space. So that's what I would recommend as far as kind of someone who's doing something innovative in the space and a really exciting program.
That's awesome. And the second question that we ask is there another innovator that you would like to recommend from our industry to be a guest on this podcast?
Yeah, so this is also another great question. I thought a lot about this. You guys have had a bunch of amazing guests on your podcast. So I was trying to think through someone I don't think has been on it. Someone that has always been a very inspirational person for me to listen to is Dr. Betsy Charles with the Veterinary Leadership Experience or the Veterinary Leadership Institute. She has some fascinating and amazing kind of ways of talking about creating leaders within our profession and focusing on personal and professional growth. I think it's always really important as a veterinary professional to not only grow as a veterinarian and grow as a profession, but also grow personally as a leader within this space. It's our jobs are our jobs, but they're also part of who we are as people. And so I think that she does a really good job of helping people kind of navigate that line and be the best servant leaders they can.
I just had a colleague that went through that course, so it will be really, I was very intrigued to learn about it and talk to her. So that's a great recommendation. Ricky, it was very interesting. A lot of learning from me. My pitch just expanded from just get an insurance, and but I'm not going to practice it until you get to Canada. So where can we find you? Where is your business, and what are the links to find you if people want to chat with you directly?
Yeah, so people can definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. Dr. Ricky Walther is the best way there. My email address, people are always welcome to email me directly. It's ricky@pawlicy.com. Pawlicy is Pawlicy, just so everyone has that. And there's tons of information on how we work with veterinarians and owners on our website.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.